Did we lose Damien?
Nope. He was just hiding behind his picture.
Okay, great.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Damien.
Hello, Kim.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Jeff.
This is Lisa Lawson on our screen. She is the newly elected president-elect of NASW New Jersey. So she will be at the helm of the organization for the next 3 years. Lisa, thanks for making time for joining the presentation today.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. We'll be getting started with today's community conversation in just a few minutes. We do have several dozen people registered, so we're going to wait just a little bit to make sure that everybody's able to get connected. It's just noon now, so we'll give it till 12:02 or so for people to connect, and then we will get underway. Thanks again for joining us today. This is the community conversation Bridge Under Construction, and we're today by Michael Frost and Damien Stackhouse, social workers at the Somerset County Department of Human Services, who will be talking about their work in the Bridgewater Community Police Alliance. And again, we'll be getting started in just a moment or two. Okay, good morning again, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us today. We are here today for the community conversation, a bridge under construction, the Somerset County Department of Human Services, Bridgewater Community Police Alliance, and I am joined today by Michael Frost, LCSW, who is the Director of Human Services for Somerset County, and Damien Stackhouse, LSW, who is the coordinator of the program. Before we get started today, just a couple of housekeeping items. I do want to remind you that this webinar is being recorded for future use, so just keep that in mind, and please try to keep yourself on mute during the presentation so there's no background noise or interruptions. We will be having time for Q&A, so if you have questions for Mike or Damien, please put them in the chat box here on Zoom, and we'll either address those questions in the moment or if appropriate, or hold them for the Q&A period at the end of the webinar. Also, you should all be seeing the closed captions scrolling on the screen, so if anybody needs the hearing aid for the closed captions, that should be available to you. And there are no slide presentations today, but as I mentioned, we are recording this presentation. It will be available afterwards on our YouTube channel, and we will email you the link to that. So you're welcome to watch this presentation again, share it with your colleagues, use it in educational programs, whatever you may need it for. So again, thank you so much for being here today. And I'm going to turn things over to Mike, who's going to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Jeff. And we are really honored and pleased to be with you today. I am pleased to see a lot of familiar faces and also glad to see many names that I don't know. So I hope that the time we spend together will be productive and helpful in a variety of ways. So my job is to really set the frame for the story we're going to try to tell today. Our goal is really to tell you how this program, which we call the Community Police Alliance, came to be, how it has gone since its inception, and where we hope to take it in the future. It is a story of bridge building between law enforcement, government, and social work, between law enforcement and the municipality it serves, and between that municipality and the various communities it is comprised of. This concept is not a new one. I am sure many of you know, maybe all of you know, that cooperative programs between helping professionals and law enforcement is not a new concept, goes back, in fact, a couple of decades initially to some pilot work that was done in Colorado. And there are a variety of programs, somewhat different from each other, but all partnerships with common goals that have cropped up around the country over the last decade in particular, with a very significant explosion of those programs since the very public murder of George Floyd in May of 2020. In 2019, the mayor of Bridgewater, who had learned about the On Point program in Stafford Township, which is a somewhat similar partnership between law enforcement and helping professionals, approached one of our then freeholders, now commissioners, of course, with a request that the county consider a cooperative pilot project between Bridgewater and Somerset County. There was no funding for this program at the time these discussions began. There was no candidate clearly to move into such a job initially. And it wasn't even clear really what department of county government might take responsibility for fostering and developing such a program. So this freeholder, whose name is Brian Gallagher, brought the concept to me as head of human services and to Bill Stahl, who was then the head of public health and safety for the county and a retired police chief as well. Bill and I spent a lot of time in the early part of 2020 talking with Freeholder Gallagher about this and ultimately talking with a couple of the other commissioners. We finally ended up having a presentation formally, Bill and I, to the commissioner board to see if they were willing to fund such a thing as a pilot, what the parameters of that funding would be, and what this job would actually look like, and who ought to develop what it would actually look like. We got a conceptual go-ahead, and what followed was a series of meetings with a variety of players. It included Bridgewater officials, including the mayor and the chief of police, public health and safety, human services, the county prosecutor, and the director of the Somerset County Police Academy. And there was a lot of discussion with activism in the background as these discussions were happening about what this should be and could be. The county agreed ultimately to accept our recommendation that this program be run out of the Human Services Department and that they would fund this program for a pilot period, which wasn't really established, but generally was thought to be a year. There was agreement that the county felt it was worthwhile to fund this exclusively without asking Bridgewater for a contribution. And that is something we will return to when we talk about lessons learned, but the county was generous in its decision to do that and really gave us free rein to develop a job description that we thought made sense. There were a lot of players involved in the development of that job description, including many of the folks from operations and planning, our mental health administrator, our addictions director, and a variety of other folks who knew this kind of work well and had ideas about what such a position could be I will tell you that the job description grew incrementally until it became a very unwieldy tome, which looked like all things to all people in all ways. This is often what happens when you have different factions lobbying for what a thing should be. Ultimately, we pared this down, made some final decisions about it, agreed on a funding line, and our licensing preferences for this position. We preferred that it be somebody with licensure and that it be somebody with a social work license, if possible. Oh, we didn't exclude other disciplines. I will tell you, and it is sort of obvious, and maybe we can talk about this later, that there are competing reasons why folks want programs like this. For those of us in the social work community, it's pretty clear. I think we all know that crises where police are dispatched are often crises that really shouldn't require a police dispatch at all. They should require helping professionals who have a very good understanding of the mental health, substance use, and housing networks in communities to really be able to go out, connect with people, de-escalate a crisis, and follow up in terms of referral. But we also know that that's not the way the world works, at least yet, here in New Jersey, and particularly in Bridgewater, where things are very much law enforcement driven. So there are some who cynically, and I think accurately, suggested that part of the motivation for a program like this was political, would help with spin, which in fact is the case. But I think all of us agreed that that in and of itself wasn't a bad thing if the program also produced good works and good outcomes. Many people could claim credit and pieces of this and ownership of this, and that was fine. But I say that because competing interests for what such a position should be were and still are the major conflicts that have to be resolved on an ongoing basis to keep such a program viable and genuine and untainted. Obviously, once we banged all of this out, the question became, who's going to be the person that we hire for this? We were very clear that it needed to be somebody who brought a lot to the table, both in terms of knowledge, book knowledge, training, but more important than anything else, perhaps, temperament and life experience. We posted for this position, and over the summer of 2021, because that's how long it took, it was a full year to work all this stuff through, we began interviewing. I think surprisingly, we had something like 30 or 40 candidates for this position. We narrowed that to 8, I believe, that myself and a human services team did the first round interviews on. The second round interviews were to be done both by myself, the county prosecutor, the head of police academy, and the Bridgewater police chief. And our feeling was if somebody ran through those 2 gauntlets, they were doing pretty well. I will tell you that in our first round, we were impressed with a couple of folks, but had significant doubts and some conflict on the interview team about what our own preferences were and what directions we wanted to go. And as we were reviewing the folks we were about to interview, we began to hear about this person that you were about to meet, Damien Stackhouse. And all we knew about Damien at the time we got his CV was that he was a local activist. We knew some of that from some of the work he had done on the streets of Somerville, some of the very good work he had done. But we didn't know much else about him. And then we met and interviewed him. And I will tell you that it became crystal clear to all of us that there was no point in artificially putting through more than one person to a second round. Damien was head and shoulders for a variety of reasons, which I think you will learn. And I know I'm embarrassing you, Damien, I'm sorry. Why we hired Mr. Stackhouse to be our first Community Police Alliance coordinator. He had to put up with an awful lot to even get into this position. I will tell you, and Damien may reference this himself, the law enforcement folks who interviewed him were brutal in the interview. And I mean brutal. They had looked at his Facebook page, which included a lot of activism, and asked a whole series of pointed questions to him about how will it be for you to live in two worlds, at least two worlds, maybe more. Why is this something you want to do? Now, it also became clear that the Bridgewater police were familiar with Damien, and that in fact, some of the folks on the force were the ones who suggested that he apply. But at the time of the interview, I didn't know that, and most of the team didn't know that. And then we hired Damien, and he began his job on September 7th. I'm going to stop talking, turn it over to Mr. Stackhouse to tell you where he's been, what he's done, and what he thinks about all this. And then we'll come back at the end to talk a little bit about where from here. Damien, my mouth is shutting. Over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Welcome to this wonderful discussion that we're about to have. I'm getting better. I'm going to get a lot better at accepting some of the things that Mike says about me. It is difficult to hear some of the things that you do and highlight, the achievements, and I'm getting better at it. I always try and figure out exactly where we start off when we're having discussions like this because of my background. So I like to just start off by saying I'm from Hobbstown. It's a small Black community in Bridgewater that was founded in 1920. Our families moved from North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and settled in Bridgewater to, get away from the lynchings and get away from the racism that was in the Deep South during that time. And I was raised in a community that was just like something that you would find down in the South. And the village was really taking care of all of the children. So I went to Bridgewater and I was afforded a really great education. And the story continues to turn. And I'm a football star and I start drinking and drugging early in my life. And I end up committing 2 second-degree robberies when I was 27 years old and a second-degree eluding. And the judge gave me a 14-year sentence and I served 11 years, 11 months in Rahway State Prison. And I'd like to get that out of the way at the beginning because when I was released, I went to Rutgers, obtained my social work bachelor, and then my master's in social work and became a licensed therapist. So that's where we're at right now. I have done a lot of activism work, like Mike said. And it really started with George Floyd's murder. And my son saying to me, he had a dream that some cops had killed him. And in that moment, I said I needed to do something because although I've committed crimes and I've done things in my life that deserve to go to prison or may have deserved to have guns pulled out on me at times in my life, my son has never done things like that. He barely drinks, doesn't do any drugs. He's a good kid, but he's a Black male. And being a Black male in America, you have a target on your back, and you have to start to navigate this system in ways that other people just don't understand and can't understand. So I decided I was going to, rally and protest in my hometown in Somerville, Bridgewater area. And I contacted the police departments and talked to the chiefs, and I didn't want it to just be a one-off where you're just rallying, you're walking down the street, you're yelling, you're screaming, but there's nothing that comes out of it. I wanted it to be something that built a relationship. And Bridgewater had asked me questions about what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. And I told them, we're going to march and we're going to shut down the highway, 22 and 206, and we're going to kneel for the amount of time that Chauvin knelt on George Floyd's neck. And then we're going to get up and we're going to go and we're going to speak and talk about everything in front of the courthouse. And Chief Payne at the time asked me, do I have your word that you're going to do this? I told him yes. And when everything happened, we did exactly what we said we were going to do, and it was organized. And he called me on that Monday and he said, I can respect you. Your word was true. You did it exactly what you said you were going to do. And we started to build a relationship right from there. So for over a year, me, him, and the two captains, Mitzak and O'Neill, just started talking to each other and dialogue, meeting with each other in Hobbstown and walking down the street and just talking to each other and getting to know each other. Me and the two captains, we went to a chaplaincy training because they were looking for someone to actually be a chaplaincy in the department. And me and one of the other activists, we learned more about what they do and how they do it. Because it wasn't just to be a chaplaincy inside of the police department, it was to be a chaplaincy for the policemen and women, to help them with their issues and when they're going through problems. So it was building that relationship. When, like Mike said, this position opened up and they had went through the trouble of making sure the job description was written out, particularly looking for someone that was licensed and in the field. Captain O'Neill reached out to me and Chief Payne with the link and said, we want you to apply for this position. That doesn't happen if you don't start doing the work early. They know who I am. They know that I've been, in the criminal justice system. I've been locked up. I can be honest. I did so many things in Bridgewater that there's still officers on the force that said, yo, you gave us hell when you were younger. You really were someone that we couldn't stand at times because you did a lot of dirt. And I can respect that and I can own up to it. But they wanted me to be in this position because I have been able to navigate the system from both sides and understanding that there has to be an understanding where we can get along and we can communicate in a way that's better for our community. So I'll stop with that. And we're going to start talking about this work that we've been doing. So in September, when I was, given this position, and it is a wonderful position. It was during the interview process, like Mike said, former prosecutor Robertson was one of the first during that process to give his approval to say he is the individual that should have this position. And this is a prosecutor that, you know, when I was going through appeals on my court cases, was denying the appeal to keep me incarcerated, because at that time he didn't know who I was. He didn't see the change. He didn't know that I was someone that was coming back into the community to work and to help build it and to actually work with the law enforcement and everyone to make it better. So we start the work. We get into an office over here at Bridgewater complex, the municipal complex where I'm at right now. Used to be the prosecutor's office that they, you know, would go over cases and different things before they went to the courtroom. And I can't tell you that it was this easy process. It's not. I'm formerly incarcerated. I'm walking into a police department and everybody is not on board with what's going on. That's just plain and simple. It's not even 100% the fact that I'm, you know, formerly incarcerated. It's that when things are structured a certain way, change is difficult for anyone. And to have someone coming into a police department as a social worker that they feel is going to dictate things that they're going to do and how they're going to do it, there's always going to be pushback. Those were questions that were asked in the interview. So how do you change that? Well, you start doing the things that are important to them and for the work to actually go forward. So they have trainings, ICAT trainings, which are de-escalation and ABLE trainings. And I requested and wanted to be inside of these trainings with them as they went through the process of understanding, how do you de-escalate a situation? What is the best method when you're encountering someone that's going through a mental health crisis? How do you work through it and not draw your gun? Going through that process with them, I understood and I got a better understanding. Law enforcement has one of the toughest jobs in this country. I don't care how much they're paying, want to go into that field, because you're always looked at and scrutinized because of what someone else did. But I can understand that because I'm a Black man. So as a Black man, I'm always looked at and scrutinized for what someone else did or for what I did. We learned a lot about each other during the first few months to just be able to work in the same environment and begin to trust each other. I can say that at this point right now, I have received about approximately 90 referrals because I am a social worker and I receive referrals from everything that you can imagine: youth, domestic violence, healthcare, housing, mental health, substance use and abuse, overdoses, and individuals are going through traumas because of COVID that we haven't seen before. And I'm gonna share a little bit about a couple of our referrals and what I did and how we communicate what's best for our community. One of the first referrals I received was for this individual who had lost her son, 4 years old, that drowned in a pond. And one of the lieutenants came to me and he said, Damien, I have this referral I want to give you. We went up to the pond to do a dive, and this individual was just by the pond, and I could tell she had been drinking, and she's the same one that had lost her child a month or so ago. Is there anything you can do? And I said, I'm gonna follow up, and I'm gonna use the resources that we have here in Somerset County to just make sure we try and get her the help that she needs. So I called, didn't get an answer. I called, didn't get an answer. I left a message with her sister. She called back and she told me a few things. And I continued to call each week for about 2 months. But in that process, I also went to the lieutenant each week and I gave him an update of what was happening and what I was doing to let him know that he didn't just give me a referral. I put it in the file cabinet, and that was the end of it. About 2 months into me calling every single week and just checking to see if she's okay, she answered. I talked to her, I asked her if she's okay, can we, set up anything? And she said, no, I'm okay right now. I continued to call and I asked her if it was okay for approximately another month. Every single week I'd call or I would text. And the one day I text, I said, are you okay? How you doing today? She said, I'm not okay. I called her and she started to explain what was going on. And she said she was ready to go get some help. I contacted, my colleagues in human services, and we found her somewhere to go within 2 hours and made sure she had the transportation to get there. And she's been doing really well since. And I still contact her every other week. I back off, but I still check in to see how she's doing and make sure she's doing okay. I tell this story first because the next part is the best part. And that was great. That she's doing well, she's doing better. But we're trying to bridge the gap here. And if we don't bridge the gap with our law enforcement, we're missing out on being able to do things like this with our community and helping them. I went to the lieutenant and I explained to him exactly what happened and what was going on. And he turned to me and he said, Damien, when I gave you that referral, I didn't believe in this program. I didn't think it was going to work. I didn't want it to be here. But I knew she needed help, so I figured I'd give it a chance. But as you came back to me every week and gave me an update on what was going on and what you were doing, it gave me confidence in what this program is about. And now that you're telling me that she's getting help, I'm going to be one of your biggest advocates to make sure that we continue to push forward and that other individuals in the department are on board also, because this is great. And this is great work that you're doing. And he thanked me. And I thanked him because he was honest. Because he didn't show me that at the beginning that he didn't want me there, but we have to work together. And he allowed me the opportunity to see him vulnerable by even expressing that. We do a lot of work with families that are in crisis, mental health crisis, children, rebelling against parents, substance use. And when I get these referrals, we have great networking capabilities with a Richard Hall and Bridgeway, that we're able to make those phone calls and get families seen almost immediately. And it's, if you understand, I know the majority of us on the call understands, right now, getting in touch with a therapist or getting, you know, some type of appointment it's difficult. There's not enough therapists out right now to be able to service our communities. So to be able to do that is one of the biggest parts. We have individuals like last week, they go out on a call and an individual is, threatening to jump off of the roof. And, officers are asking me, what am I gonna do? How do we do this? And, my son sees it. But we also have Family Crisis Intervention Unit right here in our building, Human Services building. Well, that focuses on the family and it focuses on the child first. So I was able to contact them and they set up an appointment for the young man to see a therapist the next day. So you have an 8-year-old that just seen his mom with suicide ideations and is trying to process what is going on. But when the father tried to get a therapist to be able to talk to him, he's not able to. Not for about 3 weeks. 3 weeks, we don't know what's going to happen with this child. So we can't wait that long. But we have the services in the county that we're able to do this at the drop of a dime to make sure it happens. And we just have to keep networking and making sure that we do it. The last referral that I'm going to talk about is something that we recently did. So I'm trying to give you a broad variety of things that the Community Police Alliance is involved in. I get a referral from Megan Spisky, our mental health administrator, that came through one of our commissioners because a family member reached out that her sister was going through some issues. She's, has mental health issues, been diagnosed before, was having some health issues and is now in a rehab, but house is in disarray. She's been hoarding and doing different things that needs some assistance, but hasn't been able to get the, any assistance through any services to make sure that she's okay. I took the time to meet with her sister and discuss what was going on and to find out what we could actually do to help. Went to the house and seen that the house is inhabitable and it's not her fault. She's not able to she's not mobile. She needs some VNA, so she needs some visiting nurses to come and to take care of her. But the house needs to be cleaned before she can return. I put out a plug to our to our community at OAP, and Zach links me with Pastor Tim in Power in Somerset County. And because of Ida, they had built a network of individuals that could come and clean houses, and they had built a rapport with a lot of churches to get funding. And contact Pastor Tim. Pastor Tim sees some of the pictures. He reaches out to the churches and they acquire the funds for the cleaning crew to go in and do the job, pull up the rugs, clean everything in the house, the refrigerator, the floors, and it all happened within 2 weeks to get all of that done. So the family isn't overburdened by the cost of having someone come in and basically do construction on a home. During that time, I'm still in contact with the nursing home where she's at, because she's in a rehab, to make sure that all of her aftercare is in place before she's discharged. And we're still working on making sure all of that is in place, because if it's not, she'll come back to her home, and within a week or two, she's not taking her meds and she's not being taken care of. The next phone call is where? To the Bridgewater Police Department. And then the officers are going to go out, and who are they going to call? They're going to call me to ask if there's anything that we can do from the social work standpoint. So making sure we take care of the community on all of these different levels helps the police department so that they don't continue to get calls over and over that they can't do anything about. And a lot of them want to do exactly what I did, but they don't have time. They are law enforcement, and within 2-3 minutes of completing a call and clearing a call, something else is coming in and they have to go towards that. So this is a lot of the work that we're doing in the Community Police Alliance. And I could tell you each and every one of the referrals, because I remember exactly what's happening and what we're doing. But the support that we have to give as mental health counselors to our police and law enforcement are very important to this moving forward and really bridging the gap. So just want to thank you for listening to this portion. And Mike, I think we're going back to you.
So Damien took you into the micro world of his day-to-day social work journey, and I'm going to bring us back to the macro level for a bit. The original intent of this program was real-time dispatch with law enforcement to de-escalate crises and then follow up. As you may have divined through between the lines here, that real-time dispatch was not happening at all for many months. And we had, Damien and I had some sit downs with the chief and talked through what was in the way of that happening, what the internal infrastructure problems were with that. And he, a guy who I think has been pretty responsive, issued a memorandum to his staff about what should happen here. I can tell you that now, a few months later, more of those things are happening. So there is, in fact, some coincident real-time dispatch, particularly for psychiatric crises, between law enforcement and Damien. But for the most part, the Bridgewater folks are still using this position primarily by way of referral and follow-up. Now, we're not complaining about that because these are good things that are being done for many people. But the interest here ultimately is in replicating a model and being able to make this thing work on a lot of levels. It is a pilot, but we have already made a conceptual decision, at least in human services, that this is a pilot that we would like to expand and continue. So let me tell you what's involved in that. Over the next couple of months, I will be making a formal presentation to the Commissioner Board and to the County Administrator about where from here. And what we're going to be presenting are a couple of different structures. One has no change at all. Damien continues as a social worker in Bridgewater, and the county continues to pay for it, and the fringe and the car and the computer and everything else. A tweak of that is that Bridgewater gets some skin in the game, and that we share the cost of this program, but keep it as it is. A second concept is that we add another social worker to this team, and that Damien, whose title includes coordinator in its name, becomes an actual coordinator of other staff and supervises that staff or those staff. The thing that we are most excited about, and this will require elected officials talking to elected officials and administrators talking to administrators in communities, something that Damien and I really are not in a position to do in the same informed way, is to really talk about what is in this for your community and your police department. And what we'd like to see is the addition of another social worker in an adjoining community or a contiguous community, so that both Damien and this other social worker can respond both to Bridgewater, that community, and the community in between the two. I'm being somewhat vague about this because we haven't had these discussions yet with the folks in these municipalities, and certainly they will be sensitive ones, and we want to be sensitive about it. But our hope is that we can really move forward and make this much more than the amazing year it's been because of this amazing person we've been lucky enough to hire. I don't want to blow smoke here. Had we hired somebody who was less talented, less fully integrated with themselves and understanding themselves and able to deal with provocation, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are. And we know that the world is not full of Damiens. So to be able to replicate this, we need to find folks who can rise to this occasion and be working in an environment that, as Damien alluded to, is not always supportive and always helpful. I will mention an elephant in the room, at least in the mind of some of you, I'm sure. Bridgewater is not a city you haven't heard of this year. You are aware, I am sure, of the mall incident that took place in February of this year. We are still awaiting the AG's report on that and their recommendations to the Bridgewater Police Department. But I can tell you that this made all of the role conflicts incredibly difficult, because the township, understandably, wanted Damien to be out front, and apologist may be too strong a word, but to explain to the community as a Black man what happened here. Well, that's not Damien's role, and that's been difficult for him. For me, there has been difficulty in role conflict as well, walking the line between program development and progressive movement and enabling. So I know I am talking to a well-educated group today. And so understand that a lot of what happens in supervision between Damien and me is talking about those very conflicts, how he feels when he is both an activist, a proud Black American, and in the belly of the beast, and being asked to do all sorts of things for all sorts of people for all sorts of reasons. And for me, it's the conflict of being an old, and I will fess up to that, I've worked in this county for 40 years now, as an old social worker who really wants to continue to move this progressive ball down the field. As was noted, and I think you will see in the chat a little bit, there are other programs like this and some that are much farther along than we are. But I can tell you that we have no notion of turning back here. And as long as folks will allow the discussion and be willing to put meat on this conceptual bone framework, we're going to continue to move. And I will last say, and Jeff, then I'll turn it back over to you, that we are really excited about what has happened, even with all of this difficulty this year and how wrenching it has been on so many levels. We are thankful that we've been able to do this work. We see the difference it makes. And you know, it's not just for the residents of Bridgewater. Damien has had a really powerful effect, and I'm embarrassing you for the last time, Mr. Stackhouse, on the helping community. There has been a real energizing, I think, around a lot of things, simply based on Damien's charisma and his ability to communicate his caring clearly to people. So we could have talked for a couple of hours. I know there are holes in what we've presented. So let me stop and see if I'm going to turn it back to Jeff for any questions you may have for Damien or for me. But we thank you for the time. We like talking about this.
Wow. Mike and Damien, thank you so much. We have about 10 minutes for questions, and I'm sure there are people that would love to speak with you. I don't want to take up too much time with myself here, just to say that this was such a powerful presentation. And honestly, in the 2.5 or so years that we've been doing these community conversations, this is probably one of the most gripping and relevant conversations that we've had. And I want to thank you for your openness and for your willingness to share about everything that's gone behind the scenes and the process with selecting Damien, and how your life experiences have played into this. Just absolutely amazing work that you're doing. And with that, I see a chat, his comments been added to the chat. And if you would like to speak to Mike or Damien directly, please feel free to raise your Zoom hand and we'll call on you as well. Let me see, Jane, would you like to unmute yourself while I read what is put here in the chat? You there, Jane?
Oh, yes. First of all, thank you. This is different from what I expected. I love how you've been proactive instead of just reacting to mental health crisis, like as Mr. Frost said, in real time. But have you gone on some real time dispatches that involve any kind of possible threats of violence?
Damien, you want to take that?
So with threats of violence, I wouldn't say yes. There has been incidences where individuals, you know, are going through a mental health crisis and it's not a voluntary transport to PES or to the hospital. But violence, nothing has turned violent as of yet, and I guess that's a great thing. But there has been multiple incidences where individuals involuntary or committed to the hospital, and those real times are happening. I have my phone on right now, and Mike knows if it rings, it takes precedent over wherever I'm at or whatever's going on.
And it just seems to me that these proactive measures you've been taking, and over long periods of time, developing relationships with residents and all, who knows how many possibly violent incidents you have prevented. This is amazing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you so much, Jane.
Jeff,
Yeah.
let me react to something in the chat, if I may. Lisa Lawson posted a whole lot of really good stuff. Lisa, let me say a couple of things about that. One is in terms of 988, for example. I happen to be the representative from my Human Service Director cohort on the AG Mental Health Task Force Steering Committee. And I will tell you that what has come up for law enforcement around the rollout of 988 is, again, a sense of pathways that are somewhat unclear to them, a lack of coordination in their mind between program development and logistics on the ground. I think none of that is a surprise. And I want to just underscore something that I think we all know, but is worth underscoring. It is easy, relatively easy, not easy, it's relatively easy to do one-off programs that are not connected to other things. This is a systemic issue throughout this country. All of the things we've talked about today are ongoing societal issues, and they really require ongoing funding, federal, state, county, municipal levels, and a hands-all in. I am quite conscious, and one of the reasons I mentioned that I'm an old guy, I am quite conscious of time running out in a lot of ways. As we look at 100-degree temperatures coming, I'm thinking about time running out for the planet. But in terms of this kind of work, and I will piggyback on something else I see in the chat here, which is what can people do? Well, one thing you can do is communicate to your elected officials that these kinds of programs are worth having, that they're worth funding, that they make differences on a real life day-to-day basis for all residents of municipalities. Politicians respond to voters. They don't respond so much to talking head social workers. That's part of what you can do. But Lisa, thank you for all of that. And I hope people read Lisa's comments.
Thanks, Damien. That was a great discussion. And again, thanks, Lisa, for your conversation starter in the chat. And Jennifer, thank you for raising the question about what others can do to become a part of this work. We have a couple of minutes left. I see Damien has placed his email in the chat for those of you who may want that. It's dstackhouse@co.somerset.nj.us, and he's added his phone number as well. We'll also send that information out to you in the email you'll get with the recording of this webinar after the event as well. And Mike's now added his email as well. In the few minutes we have left, is there anybody else that would like to ask a question of Damien or Mike? Just raise your hand or drop it in the chat real quick.
Okay, this is my Zoom hand raised.
Hi.
I want to thank Damien. I'll confess I work with the two of them, but it's always good to hear more about what they're doing. And just to echo what Mike said, people do need to speak up, and it's not even only to your elected officials, it's just everywhere you are. If you see something that isn't right, or someone's rights being violated, or something that, just is just unjust. I think we just all have to say something outside of rooms like this, where we are with a sensitive audience that feels the way that we do. I mean, I feel like it's easy to say in a space like this that's filled with social worker types, but I think in our everyday lives on Facebook and in other places, we just have to call it out when we see it.
Thank you, Kim. And I should point out there's other work like this, different programs and different models, but other work like this going on around the state as well, where social workers are working in tandem with law enforcement to try and create safer communities and better responses to some of these incidences. There's work being led by social workers in South Orange. There's work being led by social workers up in Bloomfield. Mike mentioned the work going on down, I think it's in Burlington County earlier today. And really one of the roles that NASW New Jersey wants to play in this effort is to really continue to shine a light on this important work and to keep it at the forefront, to make sure our members know about it, that they're talking to their legislators about it, that they're learning about what programs are successful and how they can get implemented. And also, as Mike and Lisa noted in their conversation, the importance of having these programs funded and making a continuous service that can carry on in perpetuity so that we can continue to improve outcomes for individuals and families in our communities. Our staff is meeting tomorrow with some of the violence prevention team in Newark to learn more about the efforts that are going on in Newark that are being led by a social worker, Lakeisha Ure, who was actually our social worker of the year this past year. And we will be meeting with the folks doing work in South Orange again in the coming weeks as well. That's being led by Juan Rios, a longtime NASW member and faculty at the Seton Hall School of Social Work. So really, really good work going on. And please, you know, if you're interested in this type of stuff, please let us know so we can continue to champion this work and to schedule webinars and CE presentations and just really raise awareness of how social workers can play their role in these situations. I don't see any other hands raised, so I want to thank Mike and Damien again for your time today. Really, really appreciated, gentlemen.
We thank you.
Jeff.
Yeah, thank you all so much, and we will see many of you, I hope, at our next community conversation. Have a great day, everybody. Try to stay cool.
Jeff, thank you for hosting and organizing everything.
You're welcome so much. Thanks, Kim.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.